Chocolate is the ultimate symbol of love on Valentine's Day. Every year, millions of people exchange heart-shaped boxes filled with chocolates, indulging in sweet treats that have become synonymous with romance. But behind every chocolate bar is a complex and often grueling process, one that begins in the cocoa farms of West Africa. Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire, two countries that produce over 60% of the world's cocoa, are at the heart of this global industry. Yet few people think about the farmers who work tirelessly to cultivate these beans, the challenges they face, or how recent crises are making Valentine's Day chocolate more expensive than ever. From unpredictable weather and crop diseases to economic policies that leave farmers struggling, the reality of cocoa farming is far from sweet. So, how are millions of cocoa beans farmed, processed, and shipped across the world just in time for Valentine's Day? And why is this industry facing its biggest crisis in decades? Let's dive into the story of the cocoa industry and the battle to keep chocolate on store shelves. Cocoa farming in Ghana is deeply ingrained in the country's economy, culture, and history. Ghanaian cocoa farmers, most of whom operate on small family farms averaging 2 to 3 hectares, play a critical role in supplying chocolate manufacturers worldwide. The farming process begins with land preparation and planting. Farmers clear land to plant cocoa seedlings, often under the shade of taller trees, mimicking natural rainforest conditions. While this shade-grown method helps retain soil moisture and prevent excessive heat damage, many farmers have shifted to full-sun cocoa farming to increase yields. However, this method comes with drawbacks, including soil degradation, greater vulnerability to pests, and increased fertilizer dependence. Once cocoa trees reach maturity after 3 to 5 years, they start producing cocoa pods, which take about 6 months to ripen. Cocoa trees flower and bear fruit year-round, but Ghana has 2 primary harvest periods. The main harvest season from October to March, which accounts for the bulk of Ghana's cocoa exports. The mid-crop season from April to June, which produces a smaller yield but still contributes to the cocoa trade. Harvesting cocoa pods is entirely manual. Farmers use machetes to carefully cut ripe pods from the trees. Once harvested, the pods are split open to extract the beans, which are surrounded by a white sweet pulp. These beans then go through fermentation and drying, 2 critical steps in cocoa processing. Fermentation is what gives cocoa its rich flavor. The beans are fermented in wooden boxes or heaped into piles, covered with banana leaves for 5 to 7 days. During this time, the natural sugars break down, and the signature chocolate aroma begins to develop. After fermentation, the beans are spread out under the sun to dry for up to 10 days. This step is vital to prevent mold growth and ensure the beans are stable for transport. In rural Ghana, drying is often done on raised wooden platforms or concrete slabs, with farmers carefully turning the beans throughout the day. Once dried, cocoa beans are packed into 50 to 60 kilogram sacks and transported to collection centers, where they are graded based on size, moisture content, and quality before being sold to exporters, manufacturers, and global chocolate companies. Cocoa is Ghana's most valuable export crop, accounting for about 20% of the country's total export earnings and contributing approximately 5 to 7% of Ghana's GDP. On a local level, cocoa farming provides livelihoods for over 800,000 smallholder farmers, as well as countless transporters, laborers, and traders. The industry supports entire communities, funding schools, healthcare centers, and rural infrastructure projects. However, many farmers still live in poverty, struggling to earn sustainable incomes despite cocoa's importance to the global economy. At the national level, Ghana's cocoa industry is tightly controlled by the Ghana Cocoa Board, Cocoa Board, which sets fixed farm gate prices to stabilize farmer earnings. While this system protects farmers from volatile global cocoa prices, it also prevents them from benefiting when market prices soar. Internationally, Ghana plays a key role in the global chocolate supply chain. The country exports most of its cocoa to Europe and North America, with major chocolate manufacturers like Mars, Hershey's, and Ferrero relying on Ghanaian beans for their chocolate products. In 2024, cocoa prices skyrocketed to over $11,530 per metric ton, breaking all historical records. Yet, most Ghanaian farmers did not see significant income gains because Cocoa Board's fixed pricing system meant they were paid a predetermined amount far below the soaring global price. The rising cost of cocoa has already affected chocolate manufacturers, forcing some to shrink chocolate bar sizes while keeping prices the same, a strategy known as shrinkflation. Introduce more non-cocoa ingredients such as nuts or caramel to compensate for higher costs, reduce the percentage of real cocoa in their recipes to cut costs. If these trends continue, Valentine's Day chocolates in 2025 and beyond will likely be more expensive, with consumers paying significantly higher prices for the same products. Ghana's cocoa industry has always faced challenges, but the next 4 years could bring the most severe crisis yet. 1. Climate change and weather extremes. Cocoa farming is heavily dependent on stable weather patterns, but climate change has made rainfall unpredictable, leading to extended droughts in some areas and excessive rainfall in others. Farmers in Ghana have reported losses of up to 30% of their crops due to climate-related disruptions. Additionally, rising global temperatures could reduce suitable cocoa growing land by 30 to 50% by 2050, forcing farmers to migrate to new areas, often at the cost of deforestation. 2. Cocoa swollen shoot virus, CSSV, the silent killer. One of the biggest threats to Ghana's cocoa farms is cocoa swollen shoot virus, CSSV, an incurable disease spread by mealybugs that attack cocoa trees, causing leaves to shrivel and pods to shrink. Over 160,000 hectares of cocoa farms have already been lost to CSSV, and the only solution is to cut down infected trees, a devastating blow to farmers who must then wait 4 to 5 years for newly planted trees to bear fruit. 3. Economic instability and cocoa smuggling. Ghana's fixed cocoa pricing system has led to widespread cocoa smuggling into neighboring Côte d'Ivoire, where farmers can often get higher prices. The Ghanaian government has raised farmgate prices by 45% in 2024, but with inflation still hovering around 45%, farmers continue to struggle with rising costs of fertilizers, transportation, and labor. 4. Trade agreements and export policies. Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire introduced the Living Income Differential (LIDE) policy in 2019, which adds a $400 per ton premium to cocoa prices to improve farmer incomes. However, major chocolate companies have found loopholes to avoid paying this premium, reducing its effectiveness. Additionally, new EU deforestation laws of 2025 will require cocoa-producing countries to prove their beans were not grown on deforested land, further complicating trade for Ghanaian farmers. Now, let's shift our focus to Côte d'Ivoire, the world's largest cocoa producer, which supplies nearly 40% of the global cocoa market. Despite its dominance in cocoa farming, Ivorian farmers face similar struggles to their Ghanaian counterparts, battling economic instability, climate change, and market manipulation by global chocolate giants. Cocoa farming in Côte d'Ivoire follows a similar process to that of Ghana, but on a much larger scale. The country has more than 600,000 cocoa farmers, most of whom operate on small-scale family farms averaging 2 to 4 hectares. However, there are also large cocoa plantations, often controlled by cooperatives and agribusinesses, that export cocoa in bulk to international buyers. Land preparation and planting. Farmers clear forested land, often through slash and burn methods, to make room for cocoa trees. This practice has significantly contributed to deforestation, leading to strict international regulations requiring proof of sustainable farming. Growth and maintenance. Cocoa trees require regular weeding, pruning, and pest control. Farmers use both organic and chemical fertilizers to improve yields. However, due to rising costs, many farmers cannot afford fertilizers, leading to lower quality beans and reduced output. Harvesting. Like Ghana, Côte d'Ivoire has 2 main harvest seasons. October to March, main crop. The bulk of the country's exports come from this harvest. April to September, mid-crop. This smaller harvest helps supplement farmer incomes but yields lower quality beans. Fermentation and drying. Farmers ferment beans for 5 to 7 days to develop their chocolatey flavor, then dry them under the sun for another week before packing them into 60 kilograms sacks for sale. The cost of farming cocoa beans in Côte d'Ivoire is increasing, but farmers are not seeing proportional income gains. This has led to a growing crisis, as many are abandoning cocoa for more profitable crops or illegally selling their land to gold miners. Cocoa is Côte d'Ivoire's economic backbone, contributing 15% of its GDP and accounting for nearly 40% of all global cocoa exports. Over 6 million people in Côte d'Ivoire rely on cocoa farming for their livelihoods, either directly or through processing, transportation, and trade. Unlike Ghana, where cocoa marketing is controlled by COCOBOD, Ivorian farmers sell their beans to licensed buyers, cooperatives, and private exporters. However, unstable farmgate prices, mean that many farmers struggle to break even, with rising costs of fertilizers, labor, and land rent eating into their profits. Cocoa accounts for over 50% of Côte d'Ivoire's agricultural exports and is a key source of foreign currency reserves. Despite its importance, most cocoa farmers live below the poverty line, earning as little as $1 per day. The Ivorian government has struggled to stabilize cocoa prices, leading to frequent protests and strikes among farmers demanding fair pay. Major chocolate manufacturers, including Mars, Nestlé, and Ferrero, depend on Ivorian cocoa. However, new European Union deforestation regulations set for 2025 could restrict Ivorian cocoa exports, as much of the country's cocoa is linked to illegal forest clearing. Global chocolate companies are already shifting some of their sourcing to Latin America to reduce reliance on West African cocoa, further threatening Ivorian farmers' economic stability. The global cocoa bean price has been extremely volatile, reaching an all-time high of $11,530 per metric ton in 2024. While this should benefit farmers, Ivorian cocoa growers receive only a fraction of that price due to middlemen, export taxes, and government-imposed pricing controls. Smuggling into Ghana and Burkina Faso has surged as farmers try to sell their beans at higher unofficial prices. The Ivorian government has raised cocoa farmgate prices in 2024, but inflation and currency depreciation have eroded farmers' real earnings. If cocoa bean prices continue rising in 2025, chocolate manufacturers may start using alternative ingredients or reducing cocoa content in chocolates, affecting the entire cocoa supply chain. Côte d'Ivoire has lost over 80% of its forests since 1960, primarily due to cocoa farming expansion. In response, the EU is enforcing strict import bans on cocoa linked to deforestation, forcing Ivorian farmers to prove their cocoa is sustainably sourced. Many small-scale farmers lack the resources to meet these sustainability requirements. Some cooperatives are investing in certified sustainable cocoa, but adoption has been slow. Rising temperatures and unpredictable rainfall patterns are already lowering cocoa yields, reducing the supply of cocoa beans available for chocolate production. Côte d'Ivoire has faced years of scrutiny over child labor in the cocoa industry. Despite efforts to eliminate exploitative labor practices, a 2023 report found that 1.56 million children are still working on cocoa farms in West Africa. Pressure from international buyers is forcing the Ivorian government to enforce stricter labor laws. Many farmers rely on family labor because they cannot afford paid workers, raising ethical concerns in the chocolate supply chain. In 2025, chocolate brands that failed to comply with ethical sourcing regulations could face EU and US trade bans, disrupting the global cocoa trade. In 2019, Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana introduced a living income differential (LIDE) policy which added a $400 per ton premium to cocoa prices to help farmers earn a sustainable income. However, chocolate companies found loopholes to avoid paying the LIDE premium, limiting its impact. The Ivorian government is negotiating new trade agreements with Europe to ensure farmers receive fairer prices. If the LID policy is fully enforced by 2026, farmers could see higher incomes, but this depends on cooperation from chocolate manufacturers. The US and EU are considering additional tariffs on cocoa imports to discourage unethical labor practices, potentially reshaping global trade dynamics. The cocoa industry is undergoing massive changes that will directly impact the price and availability of chocolate. Some key trends include: 1. Chocolate prices will continue rising. Valentine's Day chocolate in 2025 will be more expensive than ever due to high cocoa bean prices and trade restrictions. Chocolate companies are reducing bar sizes, increasing prices, and introducing more non-cocoa ingredients to maintain profits. 2. Latin America and Southeast Asia are emerging as alternative suppliers. Countries like Ecuador, Brazil, and Indonesia are expanding cocoa production. If these regions gain a larger market share, West African cocoa dominance could decline. 3. Sustainability and ethical sourcing will shape cocoa trade. By 2025, major chocolate brands will need to certify that their cocoa is deforestation-free and ethically sourced. Companies that fail to comply may lose access to EU and US markets. Conclusion: the future of cocoa and chocolate. Chocolate is more than just a treat. It's the product of millions of hours of labor by cocoa farmers worldwide. But the industry is facing its biggest crisis in decades, and unless cocoa farmers receive fair wages and stronger trade protections, the world could see cocoa shortages by 2029. So next time you bite into a Valentine's Day chocolate, remember where it came from, because behind the sweetness lies a much bigger story.